I guess a life lesson is the journey. It's more important than the destination. And today we're going to speak with Billy DeCola, founder of Studio Kiku, a laser tattoo removal business in Canada. And Billy's journey is a reality TV show star, tattoo artist, and now laser tattoo removal. And Billy's going to share his story. Everything from his journey in Japan to Miami to reality TV and launching his franchise system in Canada and everything that comes next. Billy, it's good to see you. It's good to spend some time together.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me on, Charles. I really appreciate it. I have to admit, I'm a little starstruck here. I've been I've been watching your podcast for at least a year now, and it's kind of been my go-to for information. Starting this franchising journey, you've been such a great source. So I feel I'm kind of nervous.
It's so funny, Billy. I mean, that's why I loved working together, and we could get into that. Like, you're always a gracious person. And it's so funny because years ago, I'm probably on TLC watching some episodes of New York Inc. and with you on it. Although my favorite, and like deep down, I think I want to go gold mining one day in Canada, after I watch all these shows. But I appreciate those kind words. And Billy, before we even started, and for everyone out there, I'll just frame this a little. Billy's a client, and it's got a great studio in Canada, Studio Kiku, laser tattoo removal. We decided at a certain point we're not even ready to franchise in the US. But Billy's story is really compelling. I mean, before we started, you were talking about Japan, bankruptcy, building the business, and taking care of franchisees. So as we piece all this together, like, where do we start, Billy?
Yeah, so I started out, I was living, I'm from Florida. I don't know if you even knew that. I was born and raised in St. Pete, Florida. And I was living in Miami after, going to college for a little bit. I went down to Miami with my best friend, and I was living there, and I was bartending and doing my thing. And I just decided, it's time to kind of do something different. So I picked up and I left, and I just moved to Japan. I didn't really have anything planned going over there. I just kind of hopped over there. I was teaching English, conversational English, to people who had kind of already had a little bit of a base knowledge of the language. But I was, conversation. It was fun. I made a lot of friends, and I ended up staying there for like 8 years. I stopped teaching after probably the first year or so, and I got into doing some import export. We were basically buying professional video equipment on the used market in Japan, and we were exporting mainly to the US, but all over the world. And it was quite profitable at the time. The US dollar and the yen were, it was a pretty heavy dollar at the time. So the yen was really weak. We were able to buy and mark it up pretty significantly and export. And that went on for a good amount of time until 2008 came. And as you probably know, the market kind of crashed a little bit, and a lot of people went belly up. And I was one of them. I lost everything. And, back in the day, I was a little reckless with what I was doing. I don't know if I've changed much with my business practices, but I was pretty reckless. I would take everything and just parlay it into the next deal. So I was making some pretty big deals over there. But when the market crashed, I had to keep my deal with who I was purchasing from. I had agreements. So I had to keep buying. But when I was buying, I had nobody to sell it to. People stopped buying from me. So I kept my end of the deal up. But then, it buried me pretty quickly. A few months, it completely buried me. So I ended up just getting rid of everything. I moved back to Miami, and my buddy who runs the Miami Inc. studio, Ami James, we were really good friends. We're still really good friends. But at the time, he was like, hey, if you need some help, you can come and work at the shop. And I'm like, well, what would I be doing there? I'm not an artist. He's like, oh, you can sell tattoos. I became basically the shop boy, so I was sweeping the floor, mopping, selling tattoos, breaking down stations for tattooers. I was buying them sandwiches, cleaning up. Like, I was just, there's a word for it. I'm not going to use it on your podcast, but I was definitely the do boy, and it was tough because I was in my 30s at the time. So I was pretty frustrated, but it was a little bit of a source of income at the time. So I was happy to have the job, but I wasn't happy where I was in life. Coming from making, big deals to sweeping the floor was pretty humbling. And so I started kind of wanting a tattoo. I thought to myself, well, if I'm going to be in the shop and I have friends who are great tattooers, I want to learn how to tattoo. And because I was friends with everybody, I was just given the opportunity without having to do like a traditional apprenticeship. And Ami just gave me the opportunity to start tattooing right away, which I'm super grateful for. At the time, I wasn't really, but looking back, I think, wow, that was a great opportunity for me. I started tattooing, just doing little tattoos and kind of learning. It was pretty tough. Started doing it. And then that's when the New York Ink Show popped off. There was the Miami Ink Show, and that's where all those guys were on that. And they became super famous. And then there was LA Ink, which was a spinoff of that. And then after that show kind of went down, then they said, oh, let's do a show in New York. So I sent my casting tape in, and they picked me to be the apprentice on the show. And so there was a bunch of like well-established tattooers, and then there was me, who was the apprentice. And yeah, that was a whole experience within itself.
No, I mean, Billy, there's like just so much there, right? So I guess Steve Jobs talks about how, like, if you look at those stepping stones going forward, you can't connect the dots. But if you look at them back, like, how do you connect your experience, that decision to go to Japan, and how it's influenced you, and even being on reality TV and celebrity status?
Yeah, going to Japan, it was, I would say that's probably where I grew up. I was in my early 20s, and I was still kind of playing around. I was working in clubs in Miami Beach. I mean, it was like amazing. It was a great time, but I was still kind of behaving like a kid. When I went to Japan, it was like, all right, this is for real. Like, I didn't know how to say a single word in Japanese. I couldn't find the bathroom. It was just so difficult. I had to really focus on what I was doing. I just kind of really feel like that's where I grew up. And being there, it kind of gave me a different perspective on things. I really noticed the cultural differences. And I'm not saying one culture is better than the other, but there were some differences there, which I really was drawn to, especially like the customer service side of things. Just the respect that establishments have for people who were coming and paying them. It was just such a service oriented culture that I was really drawn to it. I feel like that has a big influence on what I do today and how I treat my clients.
Well, and let's talk about that. And I want to come back to the cultural difference, and like, I'm intrigued. Right. So Studio Kiku, laser tattoo removal, how does that come about?
Well, when I came back after the show, so I did the show for a couple years in New York, and then my wife is from Vancouver, so it was either, we had some kids, we had a couple kids, and then we decided, like, we were thinking, either do we go back to Florida and live and kind of be around my family, or do we come to Vancouver and live around her family? So we decided Vancouver was the place to be. And when we came here, I said, okay, well, maybe I should open up a studio. So I opened up a private tattoo studio, and I noticed a lot of people were coming in, and they're like, hey man, can you like fix this tattoo up? Or do you know a place where I can remove it or lighten it so you can cover it up? And I was sending people down the street to a place, and I just started kind of taking note, like how many people were coming in the door looking for tattoo removal or looking for fix-ups or whatever. At that time, I was also doing a service called scalp micropigmentation, which I don't know if you've seen it or not, but it's a service that is for men like us who who don't have hair, or you can even have thinning hair, but it's a tattoo on the scalp that, if done properly, looks like hair. So I was doing that for quite a bit of time. Along with that, there were lots of people who, and I was also doing training as well. So I was teaching people how to do that. And that service was just booming, maybe, I don't know, 6-7 years ago. It was just completely taken off. And I noticed there was a lot of people who were getting into the business that were not very skilled. A tattoo on your arm is one thing, to have a bad tattoo on your arm, but to have a bad tattoo on your head, like, everybody sees it. There's no hiding it. And I was having people coming in like, hey, can you fix this up? Can you blend it out to make it look a little bit more natural? And I was like, no, man, you have to go get that laser. There's nothing I can do. And I was just sending like tons of traffic out the door. So I said, why don't I just get a laser? And I look back and I'm like, what an idiot I was. Cause I didn't have a business plan. I didn't even think about how I was going to run the business. I just went out and I found the best laser and I bought it. And I had saved up some money from doing all the trainings and all the SMP. They call it the scalp micropigmentation is SMP. I saved up a little chunk of change. So I just went out and I bought the laser outright. And I was like, okay, now what do we do here? So I started building a business, and it's funny, the laser arrived in January 2020. And if you remember, like that's when COVID hit. March 2020 is when COVID hit. So I remember I bought this laser. It was like, a couple $100,000. I just bought it outright. And then COVID hits. And I remember calling the rep. I still talk to the rep to this day about that. I remember calling him up and I was like, dude, can you buy this thing back from me? Like, I'll sell to you for half price. I don't care. I just need some money back, man. And he was like, no, I can't do that. You're stuck with it. And I think I might have hung up on him, but yeah, I was stuck with the laser. COVID passed, and we hit the ground running once everything kind of opened back up. We hit the ground running. There was kind of a learning curve there because I know about tattoos and I know how they heal in the skin and all that, but just kind of working with new equipment, and it's a new medium of art kind of. I just kind of figured things out over time, and here we are.
Billy, and again, we won't get into too much detail, but what I respect is that you've approached franchising in a very holistic way, right? In terms of a very go slow and steady approach, and to be responsible. And so, you have your first franchisee onboarding, and that's really positive. How do you look at the business model for people that never thought about this industry? I happen to think we were talking about one of the podcasts we did with French Florist, which I was blown away because more and more I feel like retail is resurging in a very specialized way.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at the unit economics of things, right, everything's viewed from an ROI perspective, and can I just keep replicating that success? So I'm very much interested in retail right now, right? And without going into numbers and stuff, but how do you view it from a business perspective in terms of the opportunity and what you're putting together with Studio Kiku?
From a business perspective, I think there's certain compartments. You got to kind of compartmentalize it. I feel like having the knowledge and being able to build trust in the clientele is most important, and delivering a service, delivering that service in a way that's gonna you're not only out there for the money, but you actually take, extreme care in the person, because we're dealing with people's bodies. You're touching them. It's almost the same as applying a tattoo. It's like a sacred thing. And removing a tattoo is also kind of something that's sacred. I mean, these things, there's every reason that you can think of for somebody removing a tattoo, you will hear. They're very sentimental at times. It could be, a person who had passed away, or an old friendship that kind of went sideways, or, a marriage, whatever it may be. There's so many personal aspects to this that I feel like delivering this service in a way that's not about money is most important. You got to take extreme care with each individual, and it's not just a number coming in. So I think that's the foundation, is delivering a service with care. And if you can do that, everything else will kind of fall in place.
In terms of the franchise world, right?
Mhm.
When did you decide, or what was the thought process of, should I franchise? Do I want to franchise? How did you go about that?
Well, when I was doing the scalp micropigmentation, I had looked into franchising back then. Some years ago, I had looked into it, and I had even spoken with some, I think there were Fran Dev guys who were quite aggressive, and they were pretty salesman-y and I remember I was pretty turned off by the whole thing. But I realized that it was going to be very difficult for me to scale that business, just because you can tattoo, but I can't replicate myself, and I can't offer the same exact service. I can't scale it. It just wasn't scalable. I didn't think it was anyway. So I kind of stopped. I didn't go down that road. But then when I got to the tattoo removal, I was training people. Like I trained my wife, who has no background in this industry at all, and she's a great laser tech. She's capable. She can do it all. And then I got other staff members, and they had no background in this business whatsoever, and I trained them. So I realized, I was like, wow, so that scalp business was not scalable, but this seems to be quite scalable. And then I just, looking around, I started noticing like there's a pretty huge gap. There's not really any companies out there that are like, there's no branding, there's no reliability. People are searching for a great tattoo removal place, and we have people flying in from all over the states, all over Canada. They're coming to Vancouver to get tattoo removal from us. Why are they doing that? They're flying over probably hundreds of the same machines that we have, and they're coming to our location to get tattoo removal and turning right back around and flying back. So when I saw that happening, I was like, hold on a second here. There's a market for this. And so I said, I think this is the one. And then I started watching your podcast, and you talked me into it.
I did. Well, wait, let's go into, so what's the story, at least the themes that are going on, why does someone fly from the States to Vancouver? And what was that connection and relation? Because as we're talking about it, whoever watches these podcasts, we were talking before we started about that you watched our podcast, and it's turned into something I never imagined, and the amazing connection. So because everything else becomes BS, right? We need real human connections and honor them. So what are you experiencing as people come from the States to Vancouver? And then I'm going to ask you the next question is, how do you replicate that connection with franchisees as you build something special here?
Yeah. So the first part of your question, the reason why people are spending money and time to come to us as opposed to going to a local provider, I think there are a few parts to that. One, just the brand recognition. I think even though we're a small Vancouver company, I think we do have a little bit of brand recognition out there. There are people who are, you go on Reddit or whatever, and there's lots of conversations in these chat rooms about, people who are doing this properly as opposed to people who aren't doing it. And you got to think to yourself, like, people who are looking for tattoo removal, they're doing it because they're not happy with something that they've gotten on their body, whether it's a technical mistake that was made or, an improper application of some sort, but they've already kind of been traumatized a little bit. So the last thing they want to do is go through another experience where they get something that they weren't expecting. And laser tattoo removal is pretty dangerous. I mean, you can scar somebody for life. A person feeling confident about going somewhere to get this procedure done, I don't think money is that big of an issue for a lot of people, because they would rather spend a little bit more money feeling relaxed, knowing that they're going to get a service that they need, and not something that's going to set them back a little bit. And then second part of your question was, how do I scale that? Obviously that's the challenge. I mean, that's what I think about every day is, sure, you can find somebody who has the money to invest in a franchise. That's not hard to do. There are people out there who want to make money, and there's people out there who have money to spend. But finding people who are going to actually take your business model and your dedication to the clients and your extreme care that you're going to take with everybody, that's the challenging part. So that's kind of where, I can't tell you how many people I've turned down so far. It's the first year and a half of franchising, and you better believe I've been tempted to just be like, yeah, send me some money, let's do this. But I've been very selective with who I've chosen to work with, because I don't want the brand to take a dive just because I'm a little bit greedy right now. I want to be very careful with that. And yeah, that's kind of where I'm at now. I'm just, tiptoeing through it.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a fun journey. And
Yeah.
look, I like for me, and we've seen generational wealth built in retail where you've seen franchisees that when they find the right franchise, it becomes a repeat process. I have unit one, add unit two. And it's not always linear. I mean, we've seen stories where someone's created generational wealth for their family being in a retail service industry, and location one wasn't the best, but location two was, right? So I
Mhm.
definitely think I'm always very interested. I had a call today in a pet care, but not really care, just pet retail specialty space. And to me, this is, there's some white space here in terms of opportunity on the laser removal, but also, it's retail. You have your machines, and you have that repeat process to build some really good, not only efficiency but high quality. I'm curious, like without sounding cliche with stupid question, what what do you view, like what are the lessons that you take from your experience in Japan in terms of business, customer service, that you feel like, you know what, this this is important to me, and this is a lesson learned really from being there.
Yeah. Japan was amazing. It was such a great learning experience for me. Um, and just learning about the culture and how they kind of view um, the way they approach business is much different than how we do in the West. There's and at a glance, it's one thing, but then when you're actually living there and you're working there, it's completely different. I mean, they really like the whole culture. They are so invested in their clientele, and they're so appreciative of every single client that comes, just from the greetings to, the way that they conduct business. Everything is just all geared towards the client. And that was a huge lesson for me, just coming back to the States. And it was eye opening. I was going through, I guess, a little bit of an identity crisis for a while there too. Like, you're living in one place and then you hop to somewhere else, and I was working there for a while. And then when I came back to the States, I was like, whoa, what's going on? Like, it's just not the same. And I was comparing the two different cultures so much. I've chilled out a lot on that, but there are some things that really stick in my head. And one of them is just like really putting the client first. That was a huge lesson for me. And it's, it's something that I don't think I'll ever let go. It's hard to teach that to other, to staff or, the employees, to kind of instill that in them. But it's part of the training, I guess. But it's something that I think you have to kind of really believe in. You can't fake it.
I mean, that thing, to me, a lot comes down to what you're describing, culture, right? Because you really can't teach it. It needs to be observed and part of the organization. And it's something I think about often, right? Because I'm like, the strength of, we're a service organization and a business. And like any other business owner, worry about what I'm not seeing, not by our team, but by how I'm not helping them, or how we're not setting the right tone, if that's ever the case, right? And it's always, I fear more of what I don't hear than if someone complains. If someone complains, I love that because I can understand and I can make it right.
Mhm.
And then what I do find is any success we've had, it's driven by culture, where you can't teach everything or guardrail everything, but the culture keeps everyone in bounds and keeps the standards elevating. You know, I sometimes I think I'm mental, but like I got so upset. One of our team, we worked so hard for a client, and the great guys, and I'm rooting for them. And an advisor out there recommended something we disagreed with, and just trying to guide based on experience. And the advisor, you know, got in the way. And my
Mhm.
answer was, look, I love you guys, but it's probably better to work with someone else if we don't align. I you would think it's this like little innocuous thing, and they're great guys. It still bothers me. It's like it's stuck in my head. But, and I'm always worried about also, like today we had a meeting where we're worried about our clients' renewals, and I don't know, I'm not making complete sense, but
I
finding
think
that customer service connection and like that's the thing, it's not so easy, right? And to consistently do it.
I think I think you have a good point there, but I also think that it's important to not beat yourself up over some things. I mean,
Yeah.
you're not gonna please everyone. That's just a fact. You're not going to. But what you can do is always stick to your belief system. And if you do what you think is right and you stick to it, then you'll feel good at night going home and just knowing that you did what you're supposed to do. Like you keep your side of the street clean. Like just you can't beat yourself up over it though. Like you're gonna
No,
get
and look, and like everyone thinks they're right though, Billy. It's like so funny. But
what are you gonna do?
we have amazing clients. Like the best thing I've ever experienced is our relationship with our clients. So I know we're doing the right thing, or we're gonna at least die trying to do the right thing, right? As a service business, it's always interesting to me, like the business you're building, translating that culture and that care, because I know you care. When we're speaking, you're very poised and you're very thoughtful. You've been thoughtful in every interaction our team's ever had with you. And so now if you could translate that with your franchisees, that's the win, right? That's where the magic happens.
It's the win, but it's also the challenge because the worry that I have is like, what if a franchisee doesn't have that same belief system, or what if they refuse to have that same kind of culture or accept that culture? What do you do? That's the challenge. I see that as being the challenge at some point. Hopefully not, but
Well,
I'm
and I think it's wise to be focused on that. So, like, I mean, we have so many franchisors will watch this podcast. I think our next live stream is going to be on one of these topics, but I, I think that's the opportunity too, right? You build that culture. There's always going to be some franchisees that maybe don't align, but if you could do that in a special way, I'm obsessed with that. How they respond to me at Chick-fil-A if I go through the drive-through. Just those little things of saying, of course, right? Or whatever their phrases are. I'm like, it changes the game in so many ways.
Yeah, all the little things make up the big picture. All the little details. It's like a painting.
So where do we go next? What do you think is the important thing to talk about right now?
What's important? For me, being a new franchisor, I feel like there's some unknowns. Honestly, sometimes it's like, where do you turn? Who do you turn to get this guidance? And that's kind of where I'm at now. I feel like I know, like I have two locations now, two corporate locations. I just opened the second one. So I know how to open it up for myself. But how do I get the franchisee going in the same direction and that's kind of like I could sit here and ask you 100 questions, but I think you have a team that can maybe help me out a little bit. I think we might have to have
Yeah,
a chat
no.
after this. Yeah, I feel like that's kind of, and every franchise is probably different in their own unique way, but that's kind of where I'm at now. It's like, okay, now it's go time, you know.
I think it's the smart approach, Billy. We've seen so many different franchise systems, and Kelly Rosequist on our team at one point, she decided to stop selling franchises
I know, I
and
heard
just
about
focus
that.
on her franchisees, right? But it's that cultural leadership as you go forward in that alignment, and those definitely we'll follow up on some of those things. But in terms of next steps, I mean, you haven't been actively selling franchises. These are just people that are organically coming to you, and for everyone watching, this is just in Canada right now. Which, let's talk about that. Which going from Canada, you franchised in Canada, entering the US market, or you wanted a franchise in the United States. What were your experiences there in terms of what aligned, what didn't align, what's some lessons there?
Well, I was happy to call you up right away. Like it was a no-brainer for me. I was just like, that's my guy. There's no doubt in my mind. So I felt completely confident. Like I said, I felt like I knew you before we even talked. It was kind of weird in a way, but yeah, I called you up immediately and we started going down that road. But then I realized, hey, these the regulations in the States are quite different than they are in Canada. So Canada is like the Wild West. Like you could buy a laser today and you could start lasering people without any background, without any credentials or anything. And it's quite different in the States. So without really putting a lot of thought into it, I just kind of said, okay, let's do this thing in the States. Let's grow, you know? And then I quickly realized that, hey, it's going to be a lot more complicated than what I thought it was going to be. And so I put on the brakes. I think that was the responsible thing to do at the time. Not saying that I'm not going to do the States, and I've actually been doing a lot of thinking about how to approach the different market, and I think there is definitely some potential there, but it's not exactly how I had originally thought it was going to be. Um, you know, in some of this, just to give you a little bit of an idea, some states require doctors to be on board on the project, like to kind of oversee it, and they require like a registered nurse or a medical esthetician to fire the laser. That's one, and then there's other ones where the doctor has to be present in the building, and a registered nurse has to use the laser. And then there are other states where it's actually the doctor that has to use the laser. So there are different requirements, and I wasn't ready for that at the time, and I didn't really think it through. But I think there's some opportunity there to maybe convert some of those existing are already established laser clinics into a Studio Kiku franchise, and to use that branding and that treatment protocol and the whole system, as opposed to kind of doing it independently.
And I think there's going to be a ton of opportunity here in the States for Studio Kiku. I mean, the good learning points there, right, was, at an early stage, we did get, from a healthcare compliance standpoint, right, we didn't just jump in. And that's disappointing in the sense that I see so many healthcare industry type businesses here in the US where these consultants or advisors, they just franchise them and they don't even realize they're violating healthcare laws and these whole
Yeah.
host of issues. And we get the calls all the time, Billy, where I'm like, I can't help you. And I'm not here to sell you on anything. In fact, I can't help you because you don't meet the criteria really for this industry. But they're violating laws, and people are just giving them these agreements. And so I appreciate it as we work together, your concern and care and how we focused on it. And the franchising part, at least the legal compliance part, that's the easy part, right? It then becomes, what's the sales strategy? And if you're in an industry like yours, what's the healthcare compliance part?
Well, that's what I really appreciate about our interaction, Charles, is that you could have easily taken a bunch of money from me and got me set up as a franchisor. Uh, you could have done that, and that speaks a lot about how, like, your belief system. It's been great dealing with you so far, and I'm looking forward to working with you in the future. Just because I know that it's not all about the money with you. It's about doing it properly, and you take pride in what you do, and that's I feel like we kind of have a little bit of a similar belief system. So yeah,
Well,
I totally, I appreciate it.
I can't wait to meet in person. Billy, as we, and after this, I want to tell you about some, maybe get you to come here in New Jersey, but Studio Kiku, where does the name come from?
Kiku is the Japanese pronunciation for chrysanthemum. Chrysanthemum has a meaning, it's resilience. And it was just, to be honest with you, when I was thinking about naming the studio, I had no idea what to name it. So I just said, oh, that would be a cool name. I tattoo flowers all the time, and it's just kind of a cool name. So I thought, hey, let's roll with that. But we've actually kind of rode on that a little bit with just the culture of the company and the meaning behind the flower. It all kind of ties in.
Well, I mean, it's funny because like the culture of the company, how it ties in, like, it traces back to you for whatever reason in a good way, leaving the US and going to Japan. It's funny as I think about that story, I forget his name, the founder of Nike. You ever read his book on,
Yes, Shoe
yeah,
Dog.
yeah, Shoe Dog, right? Didn't
That
he
was
leave?
such a good book.
He went to Japan also, right?
Yeah, that was a great book.
Oh,
I
it's one
like
of
that.
my favorites. I just had my
Yeah,
younger son just finished it and like loves it. Um, but I think if I look back and I think about where did I miss opportunity? Like, there's so much benefit in not being part of a system. Like, I went from college to law school, but then you hear that story or your story, and like, I think he went to Hawaii and then Japan, right? And
yeah,
I think that's where all the lessons are not in Japan per se, but it's those different
experiences.
pathways, yeah, that really teach. And what I love about this, Billy, and what we're talking about now is I'm looking forward to seeing Studio Kiku grow as a brand under your leadership, but also knowing like it has its roots in so many other things. And I love to think too, life's so strange because it had to be whatever period of time. I know I'm watching you on TV
Really?
and never know we're ever going to have this conversation, right?
Oh, that's weird. Yeah, it's strange because I look at you and I'm like, oh, I'm talking to a celebrity here. I was
Right.
just, it was just like a reality show. It was. I look back and I'm just like, oh man, it was tough being on that show. It was tough. You know, I,
It's
I
it's a journey. It's so funny though to hear
yeah,
that.
yeah. But
Yeah,
to be honest with you, people still kind of associate me with being on TV, and they kind of feel comfortable coming in because they feel like they know me a little bit. So there's a little familiarity there with clients who I've never met before, but they've seen me either on TV or on some radio show or whatever. So I'm still kind of riding that a little bit. I don't like to speak about it too much, and I don't have it posted all over the website, which you might
right.
disagree with a little bit.
No,
But I kind of, I'd like to be a little bit humble about that because I'd like to move forward and not just dwell on the past. That was quite a long time ago, so it's kind of something I don't bring up all the time. But yeah,
Billy, I appreciate the time and it's fun working together. So I appreciate we got to do this today.
yeah. Thank you very much for having me, Charles. It was a pleasure, and I could probably sit here and talk to you for hours about stuff, but I'm sure you're
Yeah,
busy.
well, as we stop recording, I want to talk to you about other stuff. But Billy, thank you
Okay.
so much.
All right, Charles. Take care. Thank you.